Who wants to become a best ball millionaire?
Do you want to chase Kerrane?
Yes, me too. Well, to accomplish that, it will help to learn from our best ball millionaire elders and their teams that ship tournaments in 2022. That's why today we are going to dissect two unique teams that shared many strategic principles on their way to a massive $3 million in combined best ball winnings. My name is Peter Overzet. This is the Deposit Kingdom. Let's dive into the anatomy of a $1 million lineup. Pat Kerrane, aka Daily Rojo, won $2 million for finishing in first place of Underdog's massive Best Ball Mania 3 tournament. King Kaapital, aka ELB240812. Come on, man, you're killing me. Won $1 million for finishing first place in the regular season, weeks 1 through 14 of the same tournament, BBM3. Both lineups were bizarrely drafted on the same day, July 18th, which henceforth clearly needs to be celebrated as a national best ball holiday. On the surface, these two teams couldn't be any more different. Pat selected two running backs early, while King Kaapital, and now cover your ears, executed a true, dare I say it, zero RB build. Pat took three mid to late round quarterbacks, while King took two early elite ones, and also Davis Mills, but let's not talk about that. But when you really start to dig in and review these two teams, you'll notice some key similarities that allowed both of them to become best ball millionaires. Before we break down the 5 strategic pillars shared by both of these rosters, let's take a bird's eye view of these two teams.
User, Daily Rojo. Prize won, $2 million, Best Ball Mania's top prize. Date drafted, July 18th. Build, free QB, 5 RB, 8 WR, 2 TE. Structure, double anchor RB, elite TE, free mid to late round QBs. His special sauce, more on that later. User, ELB240812. Prize won, $1 million, Best Ball Mania's regular season top prize. Date drafted, July 18th. Build, free QB 6 RB 7 WR 2 TE. Structure, 0 RB, elite TE, double elite QB. His special sauce, we'll get there.
That's how you do a tease, folks. One quick disclaimer before we dive into these 5 strategic pillars. What follows is not financial advice. No, but seriously, let's be clear, the goal is never to replicate exactly what someone did in a previous contest. Over the course of this offseason, we'll review even bigger data sets and find even more compelling trends to consider for our 2023 drafts. The goal of this exercise is to identify the specific things that vaulted these rosters to the top of the leaderboards and give us a better idea of what types of levers we can pull in our future drafts. But one thing is for certain, a few strategic principles continue to yield positive results in best ball contests year after year. Let's dive in. Millionaire pillar number 1, running back quality or quantity, not both. If last summer you told me a 0 RB team would have won the regular season top prize in Best Ball Mania 3 and a double anchor RB team would have won the final prize in week 17, I would have assumed you misspoke and mixed things up. Intuitively, 0 RB teams take longer to turn into monsters. You're waiting for the chaos of the season to kick in and thrust backup running backs and rookies into starting roles. While double anchor RB teams can hit the ground running with the elite bell cow backs hoarding touches right out of the gate. But the real lesson here isn't whether 2 early running backs or 0 RB is more optimal. There's good people on both sides. It's how Pat and King allocated their resources to the running back positions based on what they did at the beginning of their draft. Pat started his draft with Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley, but didn't select another running back until all the way in the 10th round. King didn't select his first running back until round 8, but then he selected 4 more over the next 6 rounds. A structure that yielded very good advance rates in 2022. King finished with 6 total RBs, including 3 straight in rounds 10, 11, and 12. Pat only took 3 more running backs the rest of the draft for a total of 5 because he had devoted so much early draft capital to the position. The common theme here, again, is quality or quantity, not both. Pat shared an interesting analogy for how he thinks about allocating draft capital.
So I think if you think about things like in terms of an auction, let's say, you take Austin Eckler. In this, I took him in the 107. Maybe that's like $45 of your auction budget that's now been spent. You come back, you get Saquon, that's like $35, right? So you've already spent $80 on your 2 running backs. Then at an auction, you have to like sit there and wait. You do really want to manage those resources and keep in mind just like how valuable those early round picks are in terms of like the total draft budget that you have to spend.
Despite winning Pat $2 million, double anchor RB actually kind of sucked in 2022 from an advance rate perspective, largely because there were a bunch of early round running back busts. Pat's team is further proof that if you do hit on those early running back selections, then you want to wait as long as possible to devote more capital to the position. The TLDR lesson for 2023 drafts is very simple: quantity or quality, not both. But across your entire portfolio, you don't need to be wedded to either of these specific structures. You should look to get exposure to both approaches, knowing that both of them can be successful when executed properly. If you want to join me on Underdog Fantasy, where I'll be drafting teams all summer long, you can get up to a $100 deposit match with promo code Pete, and I even promise not to steal your running backs. Millionaire pillar number 2. You're gonna need to hit some value picks to win the big bucks. In the best ball streets, we call this value hounding. A prepubescent hound, I think. How do you determine whether a pick is a value or not? Well, every pick has an ADP, an average draft position, and that data is compiled across thousands and thousands of drafts. And if you take a player ahead of ADP, you are reaching and essentially saying, IKB, I know better, and the market is undervaluing this player. If you take a player after ADP, well, then you're value hounding, and you are saying the market knows something that this individual draft room doesn't. The underdog community is getting sharper and sharper each year. As ADP tightens up and there are less mispriced players, it makes value hounding even more important because we just aren't going to be able to out-select the market in most cases. Getting nice ADP values on his selections was crucial to helping King build $1 million super team.
ADP is the biggest reason why I won, and like not forcing things. Like I took Jalen Hurts, and then Joe Burrow fell like 15 spots past ADP, and you would never really take 2 elite quarterbacks like that. But I was just like, this is crazy. This is unique. I'm just going to ride with it.
Established the Run's Michael Leone has shown that getting good ADP value on picks is highly correlated to regular season advance rate. The teams who got the most ADP value in their drafts increased their advance rate by a gargantuan 50%. Because King and Pat both drafted their teams in the middle of July, there was plenty of opportunity for ADPs to change and for those guys to lock in values other drafters wouldn't have access to.
I felt like July 18th was still early, right? We haven't had training camp yet. I got the sense, some people were kind of viewing that as like a dead period of time not to draft. But for me, that was still very much part of the early drafting period. As we get into like later August, then we have so much more information. And so that has its advantages as well, but the ADP at that point sharper, you're not going to get some amazing values.
Pat took Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson at pick 111 in the 10th round. When Best Ball Mania 3 filled in early September, Ramondre Stevenson was going 31 picks earlier after picking up a lot of preseason buzz. King value hounded even harder. He took Texans running back Dameon Pierce at pick 135 in the 12th round. Over the next 6 weeks, Dameon Pierce rocketed up 75 spots after clearly becoming the Texans' lead back in the preseason. Not only did Pat and King get incredible closing line value on those picks, meaning they got ahead of market movements, but Ramondre and Pierce also ended up being 2 of the league-winning running back selections from 2022. To further illustrate how value hounding can supercharge your roster, you can think of it like King essentially getting an extra 6th round pick and Pat getting an extra 7th round pick. That's a surefire way to get a leg up on your competition. The TLDR lesson for 2023 is simple. The earlier you draft, the better chance you'll have at locking in big-time values before the market gets really efficient. It's fine to go get your guys, but the wisdom of the crowds, especially on a smart platform like Underdog, is very good at pricing players. Use those ADPs to your advantage when drafting, and don't forget to If you want to watch me value hound live, subscribe to my other channel, youtube.com/PeterOverzet, where I draft best ball teams all summer long. Millionaire pillar number 3, go heavy on wide receivers. Even though Pat and King took a different structural approach when it came to running backs, they actually had a very similar philosophy when it came to loading up on wide receivers. By round 10, both of them had taken 5 wide receivers. Pat took DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Chris Godwin, Hunter Renfrow.
Rare miss, Pat.
and Tyler Lockett. King secured Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, apparently the guy you need, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Garrett Wilson. And this is before even mentioning that both of them locked up an elite tight end, King with Travis Kelce in round 1 and Pat with George Kittle in round 5.
First of all, it just looks cool to like piss orange. It looks really cool, really fun. It just gives you the possibility to build super teams. Not many people were doing it, and I was just looking at the finals rate over expectation. I was using that RotoViz tool a ton, and so I was big on data about finals rate over expectation, and 0RB was the one.
Because you can start up to 4 wide receivers in your starting lineup each week compared to only 3 running backs or 2 tight ends, wide receiver is the one position where you can justify loading up on both quantity and quality at the position, especially because advance rates increase the earlier you take wide receivers. Yes, even on a half-point PPR site like Underdog. The TLDR lesson for 2023. Regardless of what running back structure you're employing, you are going to need enough firepower at the wide receiver position to have a realistic shot at first place. 5 wide receivers before round 10 is a really good rule of thumb to draft by. Millionaire pillar number 4, correlation and stacking. As we've discussed many times, correlation, and more specifically stacking, is king in best ball. Here's a quick reminder why. For our purposes, correlation is just a fancy word for stacking up multiple players from the same team or from the same game. Now you might be wondering, why would I care about correlation in the first place? In a macro sense, correlation eliminates the number of things we have to get right. Anyone who has ever played DFS is very familiar with this concept. Instead of trying to hit what is essentially a multi-leg parlay on individual plays, you can make a bet that if a pass catcher, say Cooper Kupp, has a big game, then his quarterback, Matthew Stafford, likely will as well. Both Pat and King massively embraced correlation and stacking with their lineups. Pat had 3 different quarterback to pass catching stacks. He had Brady to Godwin, he had Tua to Waddle and Gesicki, and he had Daniel Jones to Wan'Dale Robinson. RotoViz's Michael Dubner, a best ball data whiz who helps me out with these videos, shout out Dubner, found some interesting data on the power of correlation. 10,000 teams in Best Ball Mania 3 had a quarterback 1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 correlation, and those teams had a 2.6 times higher rate of advancing to the finals than expected. King had 1 premium stack with Jalen Hurts to AJ Brown, but then he tacked on a more unconventional stack with running back Miles Sanders.
If your team puts up 42 points, the running back is going to turn into a vacuum. And that's what happened throughout the season. Hurts would go up big, and then they would just run it with that strong offensive line, and Miles Sanders would just basically vacuum up the final 2 quarters. If you just capture the whole offense, all you need is the offense to score 42 points, and all of them are getting there. So I don't see it as negative correlation with the quarterback at all.
Both Pat and King leaned into overall team correlation beyond just quarterback to wide receiver stacks. Pat had 2 Dolphins running backs in addition to his double stack with Tua. King also had a pair of key Jags, Evan Ingram and Zay Jones, as well as 2 key Texans, Nico Collins and Dameon Pierce. The TLDR lesson for 2023. By loading up on multiple players from the same team, regardless of position, you are eliminating the number of things you need to get right. If you nail an ascending offense, you can reap the benefits at multiple positions. Things can work out over the course of the entire regular season or help you in a single week scenario like week 17. Just don't get too overzealous with it. There's the stacking devil on one shoulder and of course the value hound angel on the other. I'll be writing about best ball all summer long in the Fantasy Life newsletter. Subscribe now for free at fantasylife.com. Millionaire pillar number 5, the secret sauce. Even though Pat and King both became best ball millionaires, even though they both drafted their team on the exact same day, and even though both applied many of the similar structural principles and strategies, each sprinkled in their own special sauce that allowed them to secure the bag. The truth is that winning the regular season top prize as the highest scoring team weeks 1 through 14 and advancing through the playoff gauntlet to win BBM 3 in week 17 present 2 very different challenges. But when you look at these lineups, you can see how certain levers were pulled that allowed them to each win a specific leg of this tournament. It should come as no surprise that Pat's special sauce for winning this tournament was, of course, week 17 correlation, which, yes, sometimes people do forget, week 17 is the only thing that matters. Pat had 7 different players from the Dolphins and Patriots week 17 game, and 3 players from the Bucs Panthers game.
I was trying to be price conscious But I was going into a draft hoping that I was going to be able to build out a lot of week 17 correlation, because I figured that would kind of raise my ceiling and allow me to be in a position where if a couple things went right for me, and that really is ultimately what happened, a couple of the right games popped off, then I was in position to kind of vault to the top.
Brady had 37.68 points in week 17, Chris Godwin had 16.5, and DJ Moore had 20.7. In the Dolphins-Patriots game, Raheem Mostert scored 19.1 for Pat. Both of his wide receivers cracked his lineup, with Jacoby Myers scoring 13.8 and Tyquan Thornton scoring 13.5.
One thing I really like about building with week 17 correlation in mind is that it helps me as a person who's like kind of got their takes. Like I've got some pretty strong opinions and I've got some pretty strong player preferences. It helps me move off of that a little bit and mix things up a little bit more. It got me here onto Tyquan Thornton as part of this Dolphins-Patriots game stack. It's the only time I took him, and he scored a touchdown and got into my starting lineup in week 17. So he was a huge piece of me winning the tournament. Wouldn't have taken him if not trying to build this Dolphins-Patriots game stack.
ETR's Mike Leone also did a data deep dive on stacking and game stacking, and his research backs up these ideas. The odds of achieving a week-winning playoff score were greatly enhanced by stacking and game stacking quarterbacks. Not a single one of those players we mentioned in Pat's game stacks were considered league winners on their own, but they all contributed in correlated fashion in the same game environment when it mattered the most in week 17. As for King, his team got bounced in the first round of the underdog playoffs. Don't worry, he'll be able to wipe away his tears with his regular season Millie. His special sauce, though, was clearly rookie breakouts, another topic we discussed in depth last year. Take a look at this chart from RotoViz by Michael Dubner and Jack Miller, which shows the average points per game for both veterans, which is the green line, and rookies, the red line, over the course of the season. Rookie running back production peaks in the playoffs, which is where all of the expected value is in these large field tournaments. By the way, if you haven't seen last year's videos on undervalued archetypes, week 17, and various running back structural strategies, highly recommend checking those out. I got a playlist on this channel with all of those. You can also find those links down below. King nailed 4 big-time rookie contributors, who he coincidentally selected with 4 straight picks in rounds 9 through 12. Garrett Wilson, Kenneth Walker, Rashad White, and of course, the league winner himself, Dameon Pierce. In nailing these rookie breakouts, specifically at the running back position where 0 RB targets are typically found, King was able to supercharge his team with undervalued assets. The TLDR lesson for 2023: not all tournaments are created equally, and not all prizes are achieved by drafting the same way. Understand the tournament structure and what you are optimizing for when you're drafting. If all the money is in week 17, you better be drafting your team like a DFS roster that has the potential to put up a massive score in that single week. If you're trying to win a regular season prize that covers weeks 1 through 14, you better be nailing undervalued players who can break out and outperform their ADP. This summer, we're going to see a lot of people trying to chase Kerrane and King by directly copying what they did in 2022. But it's important not to miss the forest for the trees. Ultimately, we are trying to pull a variety of levers that boost our chances of drafting a winning team. The more of these structural strategies and strategic pillars that we can stack on top of each other, the better chance we'll have at creating truly special teams. If you're drafting teams with identical structures as King and Pat, you're probably a year too late. But if you pull from these principles and you sprinkle in your own special sauce, you'll have the makings of a team that can realistically compete for $1 million. Now go forth and chase Kerrane, subscribe to the channel. We'll be back soon with some more strategic best ball videos.